Hello, everyone. So today we are going to dig into the last unit we're going to do before the AP, which is intelligence. And I'll go through this. It's pretty fascinating. Usually during class, I would like to do a lot of like IQ test type stuff, but we'll talk about that as well. But today we're going to focus on four different people: Spearman, Thurstone, Gardner, and Sternberg, and all of them have kind of their. I would say like these three people kind of all agree about something about your intelligence, which intelligence is defined as consisting of learning from experiences, solving problems, and used knowledge. Okay, so if you're very bright, chances are not only do you learn quickly, but you can use your knowledge very, very fast, very quickly. And so that's generally what we call intelligence. And usually you think of like, okay, if you're smart, you probably get good grades. Not always the case. It also has to do with how conscientious you are. But these three people, Thurstone, Gardner, and Sternberg, broke down intelligence into different ways. So they said, Thurstone thought there were like 7 different clusters of intelligence. He disagreed with Spearman. Spearman I'll talk about in a second. Gardner, and this is, he really kind of highlighted the multiple intelligences. So that means like someone who's a great athlete, like Lionel Messi, or think of any like great athlete at the top of their field probably has some sort of intelligence. I know when I watch soccer and I always listen to the announcers. If you follow soccer, you'll get this analogy. Like Messi, Lionel Messi, when he's like drilling towards the goal, he's taking like a gazillion different snapshots of what's happening, and he kind of predicts what's going to take place. It is kind of a unique intelligence. You could think of some other athlete and think of them as like a crazy wizard, genius, and you're probably right in some sense. So Gardner's was known about the different types of intelligence. So there is analytical, there's which is more like school based, but then there's people who are really good at knowing and can reading other people. There's people that can read themselves, like can understand what's going on inside themselves. There are intelligence with athletics, with music, with all sorts of stuff. So this one kind of shows up a lot in every day. You'll always hear people talk about Gardner's multiple intelligences, and there's even one for a naturalist, which is I always think of like Fink. Fink is seemingly understanding a lot about nature and stuff. And then Sternberg breaks it down into analytic, creative, and practical. So analytic would be your school. Creative is your art type thing. And then arts and music. And then practical is like your street smarts. Can you figure your way out of something if you get stuck? And what's funny about all of these three things, these three people, is that, it's probably more associated with Spearman's answer. Spearman had this thing called general intelligence, and they called it a G factor. And the G factor is kind of like an IQ test score. And you'll appreciate this. Some people say, "Oh, I'm a science and math person, or I'm a English and social studies person, or I'm a foreign language person, or I'm an arts person, or a music person, or whatever." Chances are that if you're good at one thing, you're probably good at some other things too. Like your grades probably don't go like A in your favorite thing and then F, 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 F. Chances are if you have high grades in one class, you probably have high grades in other classes. And so Spearman did a lot of statistical work, and he used this statistical move called factor analysis. So this is a statistical method, which we talked about a few days ago, to understand and look for clusters of related items. And he found out that if somebody's good in math, they tend to be good in science, English, social studies, etc. and usually might even be kind of musical or something like that. So anyways, it turns out like these three people, it sounds great. There might be some truth to them, but mathematically, Spearman really kind of hit the nail on the head and said that intelligence really is associated with one score, that G score, and so they're out of all of these, it turns out that this one, and it's like one of the oldest ones, is actually probably the closest to correct, but we're not 100% sure. But most data shows that this guy was kind of on it. And most intelligence tests is a method of assessment to compare to others. Like you always, so when somebody says, this is a classic term, reify. So if anybody says, oh, I have an IQ score of like 140, which is genius level, that's really high. That when you say, oh, I have an IQ of 140, that's ridiculously high. But that just, what it means is like, that's the score you got on a test. So if you do you walk around and say like, I have an SAT score of, 1300. I have an SAT score of 1300. No, you say I scored a 1300, right? That's what people should say about the IQ, but it becomes like some intrinsic value to people that it's part of themselves. That if you say, oh, I got an IQ score of 140, that would be the right way to say it. What reifying is you take something that's not really tangible and you make it tangible. You make it part of yourself. That just means on a particular date, when you were comparing to all the other people that were taking the test in that year, you scored a 140. Now, if you took the test and you scored the same way you did 30 years ago, you probably would have scored a 150. So you're kind of selling yourself short. And people that took the test 100 years ago, and let's say they got a 140, nowadays if they took it, they would probably get 100. So it's not a like set in stone truth. It's just a score, and no one should go all that crazy about it, really. So, anyways, the other piece to this intelligence is the emotional intelligence, which if you are good at reading people or you're good at using your emotions to be able to handle things, and let's say if you're in a stressful situation, you don't freak out, that would be high emotional intelligence. And that's but anyone who's really good at perceiving, understanding, managing, like if you can tell when your friends are upset or when something went wrong, I have like a sixth sense of reading Janine's emotions. I can kind of tell when she's had a bad day or something's wrong. I can kind of read it. Like that would be my emotional intelligence kind of peeking through. And then a few more things about this. Brain size, it does correlate. But it does correlate with intelligence. So if you do have a huge head, you probably have a pretty big brain. It might correspond to you being more intelligent, though it's a pretty slight correlation. It's not that big. So if you have a tiny head, or you're missing part of your brain, which some people do, it doesn't necessarily mean like you're not going to be very intelligent. So that is like slightly correlated. And this is really funny too. Brain function. If people are really, really smart, you always imagine like, oh man, they must be thinking all the time and like, just churning their brain nonstop. And it turns out that's exactly opposite of what really intelligent people do. Usually really intelligent people are like resting. And then once a question comes, they like turn on their brain and figure it out and then go back to resting. It's like conserving energy rather than using it all the time. So it's kind of funny. So if you think of like, I don't know, pick some smart people out there like, Bill Gates or, the Tesla guy, Elon Musk or literally like, just pick any really smart smart person. Chances are they're really using their brain when they need to. And that's kind of an interesting piece too. Okay, the last little piece is probably the trickiest thing for me to explain, but here's what it is. They give you this drawing, and it looks like this. It's kind of like a sheet or a computer image where it has this on the screen. It looks kind of nondescript here. And then they remove that screen. So they remove this screen. It's called a masking image. And maybe underneath it shows that. And then they say, what side is longer, left or right? And you say left. It's not that you get the answer correct. It's the speed at which you get the answer that actually correlates to your intelligence. So it's just a kind of a funny, quick way of figuring out if somebody's really intelligent is you can do this masking image. So you mask the image, and then you flip over the next image, and it says which side's longer, and you say right. It's the speed at which you say it, which corresponds to how intelligent you are. Okay, so there's pages 607 to 614. I'd like you to do the questions, and I guess this one, since this is Friday's lesson, so today is Friday, even though I'm recording it on Thursday. It's Friday, and so this homework will be due on Monday night. The multiple choice and FRQs. Okay. And we should be looking at a some sort of essay test. I'll probably do an FRQ for you guys to grade as a test. But remember, all your homeworks, every 5 homeworks counts as a test. So should be improving your grade. So let's keep it going. Get those homeworks in. And great job. All right. See you soon. Oh, by the way, there was a video of Ruby. So enjoy that.